You may be thinking that once you have fixed the compile errors and linker errors and you have created the executable successfully, all your problems are over. Well, that may actually be the beginning of much more complex problems. So when we were talking about errors, we talked about compile errors and linker errors previously. Now I want to show you and tell you what is a runtime error. Runtime error are errors, those which occur when you are actually running the program. Okay? Hopefully now you remember what do we mean by running the program. When the program is executing, or in other words, when the instructions that you wrote in the program are getting executed, there could be problems. Okay? So while executing your program, whatever errors that you get, they are called runtime errors. Okay? Now take a look at this particular program. Okay? So this is essentially what a program for computing the factorial of a given number. Okay, so if you can recall the factorial of a given number, so if I am talking about the factorial of number 5, this is nothing but 5 multiplied by 4 multiplied by 3 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 1 all the way until 1, which is nothing but 120. Okay, so this is essentially what is a factorial of 1. So we can keep going. No, factorial of 6. I'll just illustrate one more thing. So factorial of 6 is nothing but if I just take the whole of this thing and then add multiplied by 6, right? So this whole thing comes here. So that is essentially my factorial of 5. Okay. So this is essentially factorial of 6, which is essentially 720. Okay. So what you will notice is that factorial is an example of a function which can become large very quickly, right? With just from in one step, it went from 120 to 720. Okay, so this is the program that is computing that. Don't worry about the program itself. Again, there will be a stage where you will write such programs very soon. But what I want to illustrate is runtime error. So let us test this program. I'm going to run this particular program. Okay, so let me activate my window, right? So I'm going to run it now. So I will click on the little triangle there and run. So it is waiting for my input. As I illustrated, I will enter 5 and press enter. So what you will say is that factorial of 5 is 120. Great. So there is nothing wrong with our program. I'll do that again, right? So I will run it again. So let's do it for 6. And what is the output we expect? Of course, right? So we will expect the output of 720 as we just saw on the screen right there. Okay, let's keep going, right? So I will run it, say, for 25. Okay, it shows some very big number. As I was mentioning, this is a very a fast growing function. So the output of factorial becomes larger and larger. Okay, and we have written this function in a way which is called as a recursive function, which utilizes a lot of memory, right? So what you will see is that suppose now I'm going to enter an insanely large number like 1000, right? I'm saying I want to compute the value of factorial of 1000. What would that be? 1000 multiplied by 999 multiplied by 998 and so on all the way until 1. You may say, what is a big deal? Let's see what is a big deal by pressing enter. Okay, so now very quickly you will find that it is not able to compute factorials of large numbers, right? So I'm going to push it even further. I'm going to push it to some very insanely large number, and what I want you to now pay attention to is the message that is being shown here, right? So if you see the message right here, okay, so it may be in slightly smaller font. If you try this in your own program, you will notice that it is saying, I can't do anything, receive out of stack memory. Okay, so out of memory is an example of a runtime memory. if you are consuming a lot of memory, as you will understand, if you go back to my earlier video, right? So in order to execute a program, we need the instructions which is there on the CPU, and then we need the memory where the data is residing. Okay? So what happens is when you're doing highly computationally intensive work, it is possible that you will run out of memory, because as you would know, all our machines have finite amount of memory. Okay, I may be running on, say, a 4 gigabytes of memory. You may be running on a laptop just probably got 8 gigabytes or 16 gigabytes. How much ever large it might be, at some point in time, it's a finite amount of memory, and your program will run out of memory, right? In my case, when I entered this value of 100,000, it gave me this abort message saying that I can't do anymore. For you, if you have more memory, it might go on, but eventually even your machine will give up. Okay, so go ahead, try this particular program, type it exactly as it is shown in the screen, and tell us, and look for yourself when is the breakpoint when you will start seeing your runtime errors. These are called as runtime errors.